Welcome back to the Open Concept Podcast. We got my good buddy Dave Perron here today. Say what up, Dave. It's I'm gonna fix this camera over here, but
Okay.
we'll get into it. Give me one sec.
Nice to be here, man. Thanks for having me. Nice little setup you have here.
I sent a photo of this setup right now, and I sent it to a couple friends of mine today, and I was like, yeah,
Cool.
this is the where it started photo. So I'm excited to see where everything goes. But happy to be here today. For those of you that don't know, even that we've known each other now for, I was trying to count back the years before today, but it's probably going to be. Well, I started mixed martial arts with you. It would have been probably like 13 years ago now, something.
It's got to be at least. So I started 2009. So I'm not too sure when you started, but we definitely met there at the dojo. I know I retired 5 years ago, so that's an attack on another 5 years to that. So whenever I know I started in 2009, so whenever you came to the gym is where we met for like a decade, and then obviously became friends through that, and now working together more in a business setting, which is pretty cool. But I mean, it's pretty cool concept to have that commonality. Just martial arts is just, it's not just a hobby, it's more of like a way of life. And people that have trained 10 years, and like we only know each other, most people just meet at the dojo.
Yeah.
Train with them, dojo, train years, 5 years. You get to know people pretty well, but we kind of still have no idea of their life outside of martial arts. So it's kind of cool to have come full circle to get to know each other for almost a decade through martial arts, punch each other in the face, and then now for a business setting, kind of learn about each other's businesses. It's kind of cool how it comes full circle.
Yeah, pretty funny how things evolve, and I like martial arts on its own, and like martial arts has also evolved. I think since I remember when I first started jujitsu, there was very few jujitsu gyms around at all, and I think maybe there was a couple, like they weren't super common, and now it seems like there's one on every block. Like,
yeah, it's definitely grown in popularity, for sure. I started because I wanted to punch, like learn the striking, and then I kind of was forced into jiu-jitsu.
Yeah.
And then after a few years, and actually started becoming actually enjoying it. Since we become a blue belt, like, oh, this is actually pretty cool. And then you actually start learning how awesome jiu-jitsu is, and like, oh man, and then meeting the people through that, right? So getting tapped out. It's a very, very humbling experience. You think you're tough until you actually train with people. Like for me, it was JT. I thought I was good at triangles, and then JT just like schooled me. I'm like, hey man, this is like, why is it so easy for you? And I was like, oh, there's so much to learn. That's the part about, especially jiu-jitsu martial arts. It's like the more you learn, the more you realize you really don't know much, and it's just a never-ending learning process, which is kind of relatable to life. Which is why it's, for me, I started late, 2009. I was 20, like, not to age myself. Let's just say I started really late. And now the next generation, I wish I started at 5 years old, and seeing the kids and UFC, I pretty much stopped watching all sports, and I just know everything about UFC hardcore. And then seeing the evolution, kids that start training at their 5, and then it just keeps progressing, it just keeps getting better and better. Like as a fan.
Well, you're doing a ton of commentating these days for leagues like Battlefield.
Yeah, that's pretty sweet. So basically, that's kind of cool how that happened. I was just part of the events a lot. I'd fight as much as I could every other month, it seems, and then I somehow got into the commentary role because it's like I just love it. And then I just like get best seats in the house. And I used to train at 3 different gyms. I know all the guys.
Yeah.
And then Battlefield is the number one developmental organization in Canada. We're coming on, I think next show is actually January, I believe 23rd. Crazy stacked card. We're not on UFC Fight Pass, so the quality just keeps getting up and up and up, and the production value is amazing. And then we actually, I actually went to UFC Edmonton with them. First time in history, 3 of our champions that we sent to the UFC were fighting on the same card in Edmonton.
Really?
So it's pretty cool to be on a Canadian card. We had Jamie Lynn, first woman from Squamish.
Yeah.
Kyle Machado, Bigfoot from Franco's. He was on there as well. And then Surrey City, who's actually from Ontario, he turned up Niagara top team. But they were all champs in VFL. So it's pretty cool to see them, the evolution. You see them fight. That's kind of their recipe. You got to win the belt, and then we're trying to push them to the big show, and to see them there, that's pretty cool to be part of. I mean, hey, I'm just a fan with the mic, man. I just like to talk about MMA all day. You know me.
Yeah, it's like I maybe it's just me, but I seem to notice that, like you mentioned, getting involved or wishing you got involved when you were 5 years old. I don't really think it was well known when we were that age, but now I'm
Yeah.
seeing this next generation. They are starting a lot younger. Like you can, like technology's better, training how you train, just the amount of information online that you can consume, like just
Tutorials, you can learn a whole bunch of stuff online. There's unlimited amounts of tutorials, right? But nothing beats in person. But before, like 10, 15 years, there was no online tutorials. You couldn't learn anything. Now it's just like unlimited, and like you said, it's kind of like Starbucks. There's a dojo on every corner, and then there's so many different aspects. Like to me, comes to mind. I did gi, like traditional jiu-jitsu. We're under Megaton Diaz, and then did that for probably first 5 years was only gi. Got choked out a couple times. I'm like, damn it, I need to learn this no gi stuff, right? Because we never really trained leg locks.
yeah.
Now over the past 5-10 years, it's blown up and becoming
But
quite.
leg was a dirty word for a long time.
Yeah, it's like, ooh, like you're gonna injure your opponents. For me, I just wanted to be the best athlete or be able. I just want to tap people out, like in combat. Because I did in professional MMA, it's like I just want to learn how to tap people out. I'm getting choked out, and JT, who's like a amazing instructor and jiu-jitsu practitioner, was like, hey, the best guy I know for no-gi, his name is Nabil Salame. He's the first 10th planet black belt under Eddie Bravo in Canada. They own Titan Training Center in Coquitlam, which is blown up, which is an amazing facility.
Yeah,
they're absolutely killing it. And then I went there for the jiu-jitsu, met him, Ken Manchurang, who's a Muay Thai instructor, and I was seeing his little kids from a really young age. They've been doing full MMA. Like they're like, you see this kid hit the pads, you're like, man, that's the next generation, man. He's already competing and stuff. But these kids in 5 years, like we're in for a treat. Just like hockey, like the evolution, like the size of the guys now. They just say, would Gretzky back then be as good as he was now? Because the guys are like freaking monsters. Like they're 220 on skates. They're all agile. They're stronger. They're better. They're faster.
Yeah.
It's just a new world. But then for me, my passion was just went hardcore into MMA. And then just seeing the quality that's coming out, just only Canada, but seeing the kids coming up, it's exciting to watch as a fan. And like I pretty much never miss a UFC.
Yeah, exactly. I've heard Joe Rogan say a couple times when he's talking UFC about the greatest of all time, and there's he talks about, well, it's really tough to define who the greatest of all time is, because you have to compare them when they're in their prime based
100%.
on their surroundings.
100%.
Like I have the Tao of Jeet Kune Do over there behind my desk, right? And I was like, oh, Bruce Lee, he was the GOAT.
That's how I started too. I got obsessed with Bruce Lee. That's how I even got the martial arts.
But you wonder now, it's like, oh, hey, if he was to step in the ring to box or to grapple with any of the high level UFC guys today, like how would that go?
I mean, that's kind of fun to think about. But for sure, a lot of it's been coming out, my top five. And I think what I've heard the past few weeks, because that's all my feed is basically just MMA marketing. It's like the last few I've seen the last couple of days, actually, it's really, really per era. Yeah, because like when Anderson Silva, you got to put him in there. When he was there, he was undefeated. He was just doing some new stuff, just unbelievable creativity, but just finishing guys. GSP in his prime, like he fought all the best. John Jones, Animal, always submitting everybody. So it's like
BJ Penn a couple of times.
BJ Penn in his prime was like unbelievable, but Anderson Silva at the end, like the problem is like people don't retire on time, and then it kind of like tarnishes their legacy a little bit. But you look at Anderson Silva in his prime, like he was doing some next level stuff, right? So I think per era makes a lot of sense, and per category, because it's very different. How do you compare like a Mighty Mouse versus John Jones? It's just like it's that part when it's pound for pound. That's a whole other debate. Yeah. But to answer your question about Bruce Lee, I mean, if you look at his old movie, he was the first guy in combat. It'd be great to see. Like in MMA now, it's so mixed that you have to really be good everywhere. You can't just be like a striker and then think that you're going to do well, because a wrestler or jiu-jitsu guy is just going to take you down. But if you look at old school Bruce Lee movies, like in combat, like he trained everything, which is actually my base martial art was Jeet Kune Do, which I feel is the best base, because as Sensei Trevor Clarkson always used to say, is like it's a complete art, but it's not finished. What I liked about it is that you basically make it your own, just like Bruce Lee studied all the martial arts and be like, karate, this is too restrictive. I'm like, the go with the flow energy. If my opponent contracts, I expand, and vice versa. It's like you make it your own. It's not like this is my style, which is why I love that. And if you look at Bruce Lee's old movies, he was one of the first guys to whip out an armbar. You see, they had those little gloves, and he whips out an armbar.
Yeah.
So I mean, I think he was ahead of his time. But if he were to be alive in combat today, I think he would dedicate a lot of time to jiu-jitsu, because that's come a long way. And then we've seen jiu-jitsu at the highest level work in the UFC, and without that, the best striker in the world can just look like a turtle off his back.
Yeah,
Doesn't cut it anymore.
Bruce Lee was he was sort of the maverick in his day. There was a lot of people in the fight community, the martial arts community, that really did not like what Bruce Lee was doing, because
he was kind of sharing the secrets.
He was sharing secrets, but he was also exposing a lot of bullshit.
Yeah,
right? Like he was.
And that still happens today.
Oh man, he's
I love that.
all the time. It was like, oh yeah, the black belt, like Chi just like
Oh.
throw him up against the wall and feints, and then chops their neck to bring him back to life and all.
It's ridiculous.
All
Like
sorts of
that
stuff.
all that McDojo stuff. It's
Yeah.
just so silly that people. How I just wonder how people can be so dumb to fall for that. And recently, there's that one guy's like this MMA fighter who exposed this like Tai Chi master with this MMA guy, this big Asian dude who kind of goes and he's like exposes them.
Yeah.
And he beat the crap out of this Tai Chi master. And he actually had to move around, and he's getting so much flack because people want to like, because he's embarrassing kind of like, I mean, combat is combat. Get in there, put two people, strongest man survives. Like you could look good on camera and do all this weird stuff, but I mean, if the guy's touching you and knocking you out, like that's combat.
It makes me though, like these guys have as much as they're being exposed, they still have a big following. Like these guys that put on conferences and stuff. There's a lot of people in the room that are
there's a lot of dumb people out there.
Stuff.
A lot of
I
sheep.
don't know why that is. It's crazy. But he took what I look at business a lot the same way as Bruce Lee did. His concepts were, yeah, there's a lot of fluff out there, but let's take what is going to be useful and discard what is useless.
What works?
What works, right?
So screw point fighting. Let's spar.
That's right.
A lot of people don't want to do that. Oh, I just do karate. I just do point fighting. Some people, that's what they want to do.
Well, it was because there wasn't a lot of overlap. In fact, like very, very little overlap from what I know in different martial arts, because there was, the wrestler, with the wrestling club. And so as a wrestler, you were trained to wrestle wrestlers. As a boxer, if you went to the boxing gym, you were trained to box boxers. And so you understood head movement, but there was, you how to jab, how to hook, how to feint, how whatever. But there was no, takedown defense. And it wasn't until, even early MMA started where it's like, all right, we're going to remove a lot of, we're going to basically take any rule, throw it out the window, other than maybe kicking in the balls and biting. I think were like the only two things that you couldn't do in the early UFC.
I think you're allowed to punch on the ball. I remember that.
Yeah, maybe you were.
Yeah, even that you're allowed to pull the hair. Nasty.
But it's like, okay, well, let's see what really works in a street fight or a defensive situation that isn't theoretical, because there's a lot of stuff out there that's super theoretical, but that you see all these videos of people that are a lot of the no, not throwing anything against Krav Maga, like it's a really proven.
It can work. It can work. Like any sport, it can work.
But you see a lot of stuff like gun disarms and knife disarms, and and in theory, if it's all set up really well and you're trained, then that's going to work. But you put somebody into a real situation where their nervous system is fucking shaken, like that type of thing.
Changes everything.
It changes the entire
100%.
Like you can go from like a very controlled environment to a live situation where now like your life is really threatened, and in those moments, and what I've learned, what's been ingrained throughout martial arts and throughout competing, is that you never rise to the level of your expectations. You always fall to the level of your training,
100%,
or the level of your competency that you can do over and over and over and over and over again. So as as a black belt, or as a boxer, as you're starting to move your way up, you want to look like you can you can dance around the gym, all you need to, but how are you going to show up and how are you going to perform when you come face to face with those real scenarios? And that's why I think competing for anybody should compete at least once.
Oh, for sure. That's the only way to really test your skills.
And if it's not going to be for you, because it's not going to be for everybody, right? Not everybody is in it to compete, but I really think that everybody should compete at least once to at least feel that adrenaline and know and just understand those situations.
Yeah.
Because okay, you go to the gym and there's a lot of guys that really like traveling around to a lot of different gyms and touch hands and spar with a lot of different people, which is great because it's different energy. And that's one thing that you lose when you train at the same gym all the time as well, is you start knowing guys and you're like, yeah, maybe you're a little tired. You're like, oh, okay, well, I know how he rolls, so I'm gonna go with him. He's gonna be a little slower, it's gonna be a little easier. Oh, he's gonna be way better. So I can, if I can get tapped out 30 times and I'm don't think anything about it. But when you are putting on gloves to spar with somebody you've never sparred before, or you're jumping on the mat and you're getting ready to roll with somebody that you've never rolled with before, you're like, I'm gonna kind of figure this out as I go a little bit. And that's when the nerves start coming, because you don't know what to expect. Yeah. I'm used to it, but then it keeps you sharper, keeps you tighter, keeps you.
Especially when you're tired, like you start like slacking, and like it's different looks. Like that's the what you said about like every sport being so specific. It took me a while to like just do. I love Jeet Kune Do as a base because it allowed me to realize that so many things are to be learned and can be incorporated. And then I added like just boxing, pure boxing, which I've always wanted to do. Shout out to Pack of Wild Dogs. They're actually in Richmond, still kicking it. I actually went there a little while ago, and that's just awesome. I always loved boxing, but it's just so different. Just got the gloves, and just that alone is what our. And then I was talking about the no-gi jiu-jitsu, so such a big transition from the gi. We're attacking the legs. We don't have the gis and all that stuff. The Muay Thai itself, completely different. And then it's just like putting it all together, which is nice when you kind of spar. But what I love about BC back then, I kind of trained at multiple different gyms, and then now what I see is like it used to be frowned upon, and I realized there's a lot of politics in jiu-jitsu, and like, oh, you need this patch, you can't cross train. It was kind of weird. Luckily, like our sensei was pretty chill, and he's like, oh yeah, like do your thing. I never felt bad about it. And then now these days, seeing the guys, like there's so much cross training, it's welcome, and like all the best. They train at different gyms. It's just awesome. We're just basically what we used to call like sharpening the saw. Yeah. We're going to make each other better. Yeah. If you're training with the same like 10, 15 people all on a regular basis, I'm like, you're limiting your development because you're always seeing the same looks. But if you're going with the best of there and you're changing, it's just such a different look. And you're finding out that this may work over here, but it won't work with the guy. And it's always important to not be the best person in the room. That's the one thing that I notice is like when you train with certain people over and over, it's like, or like a smaller gym, you may have the upper hand, but that's when you stop learning. You want to get your ass handed to you on a daily basis. Yeah. Whatever sport it is, in jiu-jitsu and this and that, like I want to get tapped out. I want to be like, oh damn, that won't work. And that's the most important part, is not being the best in the room, getting your ass handed to you. And that's why I liked the different looks of the different sparring when I went to I know it was GSP, obviously French Canadian. I always wanted to go to TriStar.
Yeah, you're French as well, right?
Yeah, I'm French, so I'm like, one day I'm going to go to TriStar. I've lived there for like over a month in the dorms. Like it was a lifelong goal. Train with George and the guys, and it's just like you have a pro class and it's all pros and like all UFC guys. I'm like, dude, this is like the real deal. Like I'm getting like tossed around like a ragdoll from like I trained a lot with Olivier Mercier, OEM. They used to call him the Quebec Kid, who's now the Canadian Gangster. He's 155er. He's a judo guy, right? He's just like we had some, like tossing me around like a ragdoll. Like that's real life. Like he's that much better than me, and I was a big guy. Like I'm bigger, but it's like talent matters. But you're getting in there with sharps and you're training different looks, and you're just getting work. You know that you learned something that day. You learn, even if you're getting your ass handed to you. It's part of the learning process, and it never stops.
Yeah, and it's funny. Yeah, you mentioned that, 'cause it's like same thing in business, or like whatever goal you have, or money in the bank. Like there's so many people that are out of their friend group, think that they're doing pretty well because they've maybe they have a bit more money, or they have a house or whatever, and it's out of their friend group they're doing quite well. They live their life pretty happy with that, because they think that they're doing quite well. But when you get into a room of people that are at next level, you're like, you look at it like, oh, okay.
There's levels to this.
There is levels to this
Yeah.
shit. I remember, we run a business here, and I think it goes quite well, and it's
Done pretty well for yourself.
it's successful in a lot of ways. But man, like I get into a room, went into a mastermind. There was 20 of us up in Kelowna, and these guys were, they had businesses very, very different from what we do, but they're, from also all over the world. And you hear this and you see how they're operating. You ask them certain questions, and they just come back and you're like, oh, okay, you just have a very different perspective on things, and very clearly you're like, all right, I'm not in the room here where I'm going to talk. I'm in the room where I'm going to listen.
Right.
And yeah, I mean, same thing with
Similar.
like you get into the point where you're tapping everybody out in the gym. It's probably time that either the gym owner has to start recruiting more and more people, better and better people to come in and train, or you got to find other people to train with. Because
Well, it depends what your goal is, right? If your goal is just to have fun and train and whatever, so that's fine too, right? You could be like have a small school and then like that's your goal. But if your goal is to improve and compete, like you said, competing is a great way to test your skills because then you don't know what's going on. You're going in there like it's intense and like people are fighting to win. That's how you're like, oh, that didn't work. Oh, this worked in the gym. Why didn't that work? Like people have different levels, right? And then I think that also applies in business and in life. They say you're the result of the 5 people that you surround yourself with. If you're better than people you're always training with, but it's like versus you go to somebody like say TriStar. I mean, there's so many schools out here in BC as well. But then just for sparring, and you're just getting like your ass handed to you. I'm like, that's learning. Like that's what you want, which is it translates into that as well as in business because it's what they say is like comfort is the I forget the saying, but it's like comfort is something about
the killing zone.
The killing zone. Once you get comfortable, I'm like, okay, I'm pretty good. I'm okay in martial arts or business. It's like as soon as you get comfortable, that's when you stop growing, and then not necessarily that you're falling off, but then other people pass you. And that's the thing. Comfort is what I find in business and in life. Some people are just like, I'm good. They don't have that motivation to go to the next level. So props to you for going to these masterminds and surrounding yourself with like knowledgeable people. Like that's the only way to get to that point. That's why I'm part of a lot of groups too, like working on like growing marketing agencies and whatnot. It's like every single day I'm on this because I'm learning on a daily basis because I'm passionate about it, right? On martial art, for me, martial arts and marketing, those are like my 2 passions. Like I talk about it all day. So it's just like I've never stopped learning, and it's just like, man, it goes deep. But you got to learn with people that are like, holy crap, the stuff they're doing and the automation of the AI. It's like a flow that's like, it blows my mind. I'm like, okay, like I know more than your average Joe, but I'm like, man, I'm learning on a daily basis. It's like, it doesn't just stop. I'm like, okay, I'm pretty good. No. I want to keep rolling with the times because right now with AI and everything that's coming out and marketing and automation, it is freaking cool, man. If you're not utilizing that, like you're falling behind.
The other like the difference between the two, what if you're competing in business and competing on at an athletic level, is in business you continue to get better and better. You're growing, you're learning as fast as you can, learning as much as you can. If that is your goal. Some people don't have a goal to grow. Some people just they want to automate. They're happy with what they're doing. They don't want more stress.
Some people are just happy to work 9 to 5. It's all good. You don't get don't want to work overtime. That's what most people do.
Yeah, and that's totally fine. But for those that do want to grow, or for those that want to compete at a very high level, there is a much tighter time frame for these athletes. They have a much smaller window where you need to compress a lot of learning, and it's like full on into a very small window. Whereas business, you can continue learning and always keep going because it doesn't take a toll on your body.
Yeah,
and you still keep acquiring more and more knowledge, and stuff's coming out. You surround yourself with better, smarter people that know, and you start creating more wealth and more knowledge, and you can surround yourself with those people, and that's all great. But I mean, Mike Tyson's 60, not even, right?
Yeah.
And he was the best in his prime.
He was unstoppable.
And 60 years old isn't that old. Like there's a lot of people that I know that are past 60 that are working, and he's an anomaly. right? But like to train as an athlete, you really have a very small window to like learn, and a very small window to just execute at the highest level as long as you can, make some money, make that run for it. So like that competitive landscape is a really tough thing because it's such a small window, such as like a small niche, plus it's like physically draining. How hungry do you have to be the not even the best fighter in the world, but like to make it onto the top card, which in this case would be UFC, I guess would be like for most people, whether they pay the most or not, for most people, they want to be fighting on UFC because it's the best market, best understood card in the world. Like how hungry do you have to be to even make it onto that card in the first place?
You have to be hungry enough to do something about it, right? Like it's all about goal setting. If that's your goal, you need to one start at a relatively young age because like they know he doesn't sign like old guys.
Yeah.
And then I realized that at one point I think I was ranked like top 8 in Canada, and then I started really late, 29. When you're in your 30s, I'm like you come to the realization, okay, it's not going to happen. Like I fought for the belt at 85, which is why I turned to TriStar.
Yeah.
And then the big guys like Roy McDonald, Tom Breeze, they're 6'3", and they're fighting at 170. I was like a really small 85. I'm like, okay, if I don't win this, I'm going to go down to 170. That's my true weight class. And then the guy that I fought, Ryan James, actually made it to the UFC. And that's the recipe. That's how close it could have been, like potentially. But then again, everything was meant to happen. It was the way it was because then I started training with the other top 85er in Canada at the time was Brendan Kornberger. He could have easily been in the UFC. Started training with him, Arjun Buller, Tristan Connolly, like the checkmark guys. And then that made me 10 times the fighter that I would have been, right? It's like I am well aware of that because I hadn't done wall wrestling. I didn't really spar with the small gloves. Like I was the only fighter out of our gym. And then luckily I started cross training, but then it's like, I could have, but it's like, that's what people do. They stack the record. I always took the toughest fight. So I wasn't the smartest in that regards, but guys that are just like 6-7-0, and they just fight tomato cans to pad the record, go to UFC, you get exposed because you're not that good and you get smoked on the biggest platform. What does that do to you? Like that's also one thing too. There's ways to do it. If you have a good manager and you fight tomato cans and then they just look at your record, 6-0, 7-0, you're a young guy, it could work. But is your goal to just make it to the UFC or make a career out of it? Making it's one thing, staying is another one that I find a lot is, man, I feel for some of these guys. Like they're like, man, their whole goal is to go up there and then you fight one or two losses and you get sliced. I'm like, dude, that's devastating, right?
Yeah.
I always had a full-time job, so it was like for me it was kind of like a side passion, but it's like if that's like your dedication, that's your goal. It's like and you make it and then you don't last a couple of years, like that's hard on the morale. Like it's a very unforgiving sport. It's very tough. So to answer your question, like you have to be hungry as hell, have a plan to be like, I'm going to fight as well. One is staying healthy is the most important thing because it is a lot of injuries in the sport. And like Dana White always says, he's like, your window of opportunity as a fighter is extremely small. Like right now, the dilemma is the PFL guys, they merged with Bellator, they're losing money. All the guys can't fight. They're in the prime, you can't fight. Like that's a problem. So now all the guys want out and they want to go in there. It's going to be a good thing for the UFC, but that sucks. If you're a fighter, like Gegard Mousasi is like actually suing the company because he didn't get a fight for years because he's like on a higher pay grade and then they don't want to pay him. You're getting screwed on the athlete. He's no spring chicken. You can't last that long. So those are the prime years that it's like it's not going to work. So you have to have a plan, train enough to be good enough to make it at that level, and then obviously a few things happen. You got to win a belt on a local scene, have a good what is it called, management agency, connections. A lot of it's connections. Do the show. A lot of things, but at the core of the answer is you just have to have the skill. So in order to be there, one, you have to be good. Two, put in the work to really get into the mix and then prove it. That's the one cool thing about MMA is like you get in there, lock the cage, one guy's coming out. If you win, you gotta be hungry enough to make yourself undeniable.
Plus, like to add to that, you also have to be marketable.
That too. Right? You need to talk. Be able to talk on the mic. The UFC, they want something that's marketable, something that's good, and something that doesn't put on boring ass fights. Yeah. I've seen people like just lay on people for 5 rounds and have amazing records. I'm like, dude, maybe that's your goal, to have an amazing record or be boring as hell. Yeah. That's your choice.
The crowd's not there to see that. The crowd will start booing you. The refs will literally stand people up even if you're winning because you're not putting on a good show. So
MMA fans are very demanding.
Yeah.
Yeah, they don't care about your feelings. They're there to see some action, and it's like understandably, like we understand jujitsu, but in the scheme of things, people just want to see some calculated violence, right? Which is fair. But as a fighter, I always wanted to just put on exciting fights. Like my goal is to finish a fight. I don't think
Yeah.
I've never won a decision in my life. My only losses were decisions, which is to me, it's just like guy grinds on you and like there's no damage. I'm like, man, like that's your strategy. I'm like, and those guys have never made it, right? If you just lay and prey on somebody and like you do, like try to at least finish the fight.
Yeah.
But it's a strategy. If you're smart and you can pad your record and make it to the point where you can be there. And like everybody has their own goals, right? But it's just like at the end of the day, like you choose how much work you put in, and that's not depend on your level of hungriness, like how much value input do you put into that. Like I used to train like 10 times a week. I started taking it very seriously because my goal was just to be the best fighter I could be after accepting that, okay, I'm not making it UFC. I just want to fight locally in front of my friends and fans, put on exciting fights. That was my goal. Like I accepted my fate. I'm like, hey, I'm in my 30s. But it is what it is. But I mean, it was still fun. And like,
It's you mentioned calculated fights, calculated violence, right? Like when you are again, like sparring, fighting in a cage with a ref, like arguably, people say it's not a real fight because you have timelines, you know who you're fighting, you're cutting weight, you're matching weight, you are preparing weeks in advance, for the most part, sometimes months in advance. And you're be able to watch tape. You have a referee. There's a cut man there that'll, there's that can patch you up. You have medical staff that's there, like you've been waiting, you've been training. So you can calculate in more risk that you're willing to take because you're going for a win inside the ring, which is maybe you're going to put in a place where you're going to win a gold medal, belt, whatever that is. But in a street fight,
yeah,
it's very different. Like you're
Totally.
not going to be flying for a triangle. Like
Totally
you're not
different.
going to be like that. You're going to be you're going to have your life on the line, and so you have to be able to calculate. Okay, well, analyze the situation first. What is at stake might happen, and then you can analyze how much risk you're going to take.
And it's not that easy to do like on the spot. Yeah, like an MMA fight is a kind of safe environment, the safest environment for like a real fight. But I mean, you're not going to get stomped in the face. Actually, some rules allow it, but you're not going to get usually stomped on the face or like you're dropped on your head on the concrete and like bitten or like crazy stuff, right? So there are rules. It's a rule set. So it's like it is a safe environment, but I mean it's as real as it gets without the danger of like losing your life. But I mean I've seen some arms being snapped and nasty injuries like that. I mean elbows and knees, like I mean it's as real as it gets without the fear of death, right? And in a street fight, I mean anything goes. That's where the fight or flight response really kicks in, and then that's where earlier you were saying you train at the gym or oh I got my certificate. You could be good at Krav Maga or you can feel that, but then as soon as it gets to real life, if your nervous system isn't trained for that, like you could fight or flight. You could be amazing in the gym and all of a sudden a little stress comes in and you like run for the hills or you get popped once and you're like, oh my God. Like
I remember watching a video. I think it was a video I was watching. It was a guy in a parkade and like had gotten into an altercation and took it to the ground. And the guy put him in an arm bar.
Yeah.
Was lying there like tweaking on his arm. The guy pulled a knife out of his belt and turned over and just freaking snapped.
I mean, when it comes to life or death, I mean, you're either like we learn you're either prey or you're a predator, right? It's like if at that point it's like it's survival. Or what are you gonna do to survive? Like that's why number one rule is run, get the hell out of there. And if you are, you quickly have to calculate like, oh, how many people are here? Like, do I have my back against the wall? Is there people going to sneak up behind me? Is there any weapons? Or is there all these assessments that you need to do in a very, very short attention span, which is why the average Joe has no idea about any of this, which is why I always recommend training martial arts at a young age, because not only does it give you confidence and discipline, so many good things, but the ability to be actually prepared for such a situation. We used to train multiple attackers with blades, with weapons. I mean, distance is the number one thing. Somebody pulls a knife, knowing to keep your distance. I mean, that's why it's like when my buddies like get drunk, we always used to have a challenge, be like, oh, we get drunk and they want to fight. I'm like, hey, that fight's not going to last more than I can tap you in under 60 seconds. I've won TVs, watches, all my friends get drunk. Oh, 60 seconds, that's a long time. I'm like, no, it's not. It's not. And time again, I'm like 60 seconds. I train daily, and then like this is what I do. People that train for years versus somebody that doesn't,
Yeah.
it's not even close. Which is why one of my favorite bits is somebody asked Joe Rogan like, "Oh, why is jujitsu so good?" It's like, well, if I wanted to, I could kill you.
Yeah.
Fair point. I mean, that's the difference. I could snap your limb. Somebody that doesn't know jujitsu or have to fight, it's an equalizer. Even if you know how to fight, like this guy that he's 250, he's a Muay Thai guy. We got drunk, made the joke, and then 5 hours later, the jury's oh, it's like we started wrestling around, and then within 45 seconds, like he had to tap because he was going to pass out. I had an arm choke or whatever. It's just something that you don't know. But if you can't breathe or like your limbs can only go a certain thing, it's like that's the real life real life reaction is like nothing beats a knife. I can be the best striker in the world. I'm not going to beat a knife. A knife's not going to beat a gun. That's why if you never trained weapons and thought about that, like normal people don't think about that. Like we call them civilians. I mean,
You also like mentioned a lot of your your training and a lot of your buddies that you're talking about. There's no training like it, and I know the amount that you learn from not knowing anything to say blue belt, like that learning curve is huge, and you learn so much at that time. But then when you move to purple belt, brown belt, black belt, like the difference between uh, brown belt and black belt really isn't technique. It's just time, dedication,
yeah, for sure.
and effort put in, because there's just as you get more and more skilled, there's less overall technique that you need to learn, and it's just like much smaller nuances that you go, and that's like those little tiny incremental steps um, are what's gonna continue down that path. That's why like a lot of people say your journey with jujitsu doesn't start until you get to black belt, because now you understand what's out there, and now it's really just refining it and kind of coming into your own style.
100%. You learn so much. Like white belt, we call that white belt syndrome. Like when you start, people like they pinch your skin and you're all bruised up and they act like it's like I'm guilty of it as well. You act like it's the World Series and you're like, oh, I can't get tapped. That's just why when I wrestle my buddies for fun, I got to be careful because they're so stiff. I don't want to. I'm at the level where I don't want to hurt them.
Yeah,
Although
yeah.
they're so stiff, they're hurting themselves. You're at that level. You got to watch out for your partner.
Yeah.
That's what happens with years of training.
I also remember most of my injuries that I've had have been when I'm in jiu-jitsu, anyways, have been when I've been rolling with white belts that are just super scrambling because they don't know what they're doing. They're not super comfortable where they are.
No, they don't know what they're doing. It's dangerous.
So half the job is like, okay, realize you're here to learn, so you need to kind of calm the situation down. So there's sort of that element to kind of go slow. But then also if you give them too much, if you give them, the opportunity for an opening, because you're also, want them to learn and look and grow in the sport, because that's ultimately what you're doing if you're there teaching them. And is that they don't know what to do when they're given that arm or when they see that arm, and like maybe you're not pulling that back because you're like, hey, I'm gonna hold this out here just to give you a chance to kind of play with that a little bit, but they don't know what to do when they have it. Yeah. So that's when they just like, oh, there's a present for me. I'm just gonna snap that up and yank on it
instead of being controlled and doing it. They're just like, ah.
I remember I was rolling. I think I was blue belt. It was later on, like my blue belt, and there was a new white belt that had come in, and he was, I think, like his third weekend. He was a lot bigger than I was too, right? So there was weight difference, but we were just like, I was just teaching him a few techniques, and then it came time to roll, and we were wrapping out some of the stuff. But like as soon as that buzzer went, there was a different mentality.
Yeah,
and then he was just like, he just ended up just thrashing and thrashing and thrashing.
There's always that guy.
It was always that guy. It ended up like messing up my neck quite a bit because I was there and like going back into this technique that I was training him, and we were working this escape. And so like during sparring, was giving him a few of these opportunities to work what we had been training, but it was just he couldn't take that those techniques that we were training with,
No,
and
no.
use that in a way
No, it's
that
like
made sense. It
TikTok.
was just like that stress of just that timer. We're not talking about
Yeah,
real life in a parking lot or
yeah,
a bar somewhere.
yeah,
Like
yeah.
this was still on the mat, still with people around. It was the same, within the same hour that we were training. But as soon as that buzzer went, it just added that little bit of extra pressure, and he didn't know what to do with it.
Interesting.
And I ended up messing up my neck because
That's-
it was just in a weird position. It was just giving up some openings. But yeah, most of the injuries that I've had in jiu-jitsu has been just holding on to the scrambler white belts,
Yeah,
and like in business too. Like a lot of the mistakes that get made are with guys that they don't have the experience.
yeah.
They come in, you think like, all right, welcome to the gym, welcome to the company. Here you go. Here's we're gonna train. Here's what we're gonna put you through. We're gonna onboard you. We're gonna give you all the tools that you need. We're gonna make sure that like you're competent in these areas. And then you go out into the world and they are super rude to a customer, or they're
There's always a bit of a learning curve,
like
right?
this, yeah. And they're like, oh man, I feel like you end up hurting yourself.
Somebody says something, they have a rebuttal, or customer says something, and then you're like, oh, this wasn't in the training manual, and they're like, and then their ego gets in the way. It's a lot of ego has to do with the same as martial arts or business. You're like, oh, the customer says a snooty comment or something that they're just like, they react emotionally as opposed to just being professional. But hey, like it's gonna happen. You're gonna have some dick customers or some hard customers that you just have to expect that, and then just I would say keep the professionalism, and it's up to you not to overreact, which is the same as that. You get the training. This is the gym. This is the curriculum you're going to learn. But then as soon as the bell comes, that's real life. Like the sparring is real life, or real life with the customer. Things change all of a sudden. It's one little factor, and then oh my god, you could reply that way, or like, oh, this guy's going hard, or you're going to go mellow. This guy went hard, then I go hard. It's just like it's this synergy about learning, which is like it's never ending, but you have to. That's why mat time and experience. Mat time is experience, real life experience. You hear about that, and then 10 years later, I'm like, oh, I am the old guy. Like I'm fighting a guy that's 10 years younger than me. I'm like, oh, now I'm kind of like fighting a bit smarter as opposed to harder. When I was young and dumb. I'd fight with injuries, and I'm like, oh, whatever. Like fight tough. And after neck surgery, I'm like, okay, how can I start working with a kinesiologist? I'm like, I don't want to put my neck out there. Then I started going for my back. I'm like, it's the experience that make you better, right? And then what you talked about earlier about I wanted to mention about jiu-jitsu. My first experience of jiu-jitsu as a white belt, because I was like that too. I'm like, oh, using my strength.
Yeah.
I trained with it was Pat, black belt Pat. I don't know if you remember.
Yeah.
He was like a buck 40, and I was like probably 195, and then I thought pretty tough. I do okay. And then he just like locked me up in all sorts of pretzels, just completely manhandled me. And I was like, holy crap. And just smooth. Like he's not hurting me, but I'm tapping out, right? I'm just like, wow. I'm like, that's jujitsu. It's
Yeah.
like, like the smaller person using technique and brains to like outplay everything. It's like a human chess match. And I'm just like, wow. I'm like, this is amazing, right?
Yeah. That's levels to it, man.
And that's the difference when I would have friends come to the gym that are talking tough and all this stuff, and they come to the gym, tap them out like 5, 10, 15. They just have no idea. Like a lot of times they never come back because it's a humbling experience. Some people are like, okay, I need to learn this, and some people are like, oh my god, like I got my ass handed to you, but that's how you learn. That's jiu-jitsu. I'm just like, my point is like, if you don't know jiu-jitsu against somebody that does, I'm like, you're gonna get smoked, man.
Yeah, and too, we've had people that come into the company and they don't understand the standard, right? They come in and they have this experience of their own, and think that this is the right way. They have the right way of doing things, and walking. Oh yeah, no, I'm the best at this. And
Ego,
you're
man.
like, okay, well we hire that, and we think, okay, they have some experience. We bring them on, but pretty quickly they aren't a team player. They don't like learning. They think that they know everything, and those people that don't play well with others don't last on our team. Just like a lot of those people, they don't last in the gym. They don't come back after a few rounds because they've been humbled, and they know they're wrong, and they want to go and live in an environment where the skills that they have, or the knowledge that they have, is going to be superior than the knowledge that's out there because they're not willing to learn more, and they're gonna have a hard time finding a room that's going to.
It's all ego. It's all ego. It's like when Bruce used to say, you need to empty your cup right? If you think you know everything, I'm like you don't have room to learn. I'm like your cup is full. If you empty your cup, that's why I always say having a white belt mentality in life and everything. I'm like, okay, sometimes you can learn a technique from a white belt or a blue belt. Sometimes you can learn something just a different way that something is said. And that's in life too. I'm like, oh, that's pretty cool. But, oh, I know everything. I can't learn this from like labor or Lord, like like there's always room for improvement, right? And it's like if you think you know everything and you're not humble, like you're not even allowing that chance. But there's always those people that know it all and an ego. That's the same thing at the gym. You have that guy's a bad sparring partner. The biggest problem with all the businesses that I've consulted with is always staffing. The corporate culture, finding a team player, that's the hardest part to find and maintain. It's so difficult. And then that's the thing. There's the ramping up period, and then some people fit and some people don't, and it's just time and energy. But if it doesn't pan out, it's wasted, which equals to business. And we're worried about the revenue. I'm like hiring. I'm doing a hiring process for a company at this time. It's like, man, it's tough because it takes 3 to 6 months. Just like in martial arts, it's going to take 3 to 6 months to just ramp up and learn the basics. New company, new employee, 3 to 6 months just to learn the basics to see if you're good and be able to do that. But that's a lot of time and resources as the on the owner side of things. That just translates into time and money that's coming out of your pocket, right?
Yeah, no, 100%. Uh, jiu-jitsu itself or martial arts itself has become more and more of a business. I've found it. Like
It's always been a business.
it has very much been a business, and that's why with when Bruce Lee started coming in and started disrupting martial arts, he was starting. People were afraid that he was going to be putting a lot of people out of business because he was proving like judo has faults, and so the judo community was after him and proving that the Shotokan karate has faults, and like why are we standing around doing all these katas when they don't make any sense? And he was like putting people were worried that they were going to put his gyms out of business, and martial arts has always been a business like a really tough business. Like if you were, it used to be, and martial arts it's has grown significantly. So there's a lot more people interested in it. But it used to be, all right, if you wanted to run a martial arts gym or a dojo, it was like, hey, you get a garage.
Yeah.
You have some techniques you learn there, or it's like you're renting out a tiny little place in the hole in the wall in the
It's a good start.
somewhere, like whatever you can do, because there wasn't like a lot of money in it, and that was made it very very difficult. But now there's so many more people. UFC was a huge, I think, proponent of making the sport popular. But throughout the rise of jujitsu itself has become a huge business. Like I personally, I follow more of what's going on in the jujitsu world than I do the MMA world these days.
Well, it's grown a lot in popularity too. Now there's starting to be money in it, which is nice to see.
But it's also entertaining. Like you look at these top guys like Gordon Ryan, Craig Jones. You look at like the teams though that they're you mentioned kind of cross training, and I've seen like that was a big thing. But people are definitely growing and building and working with their teams, and it's becoming sort of a gym versus gym almost.
It's an evolution. Like you'll have the gym like the Danaher Death Squad, and then they branched out, and then it's like the evolution throughout the years. It's like, man, these guys are so good at that. They put leg locks on the map, smoking everybody, and then they break off, and now they have their system, and now it's like it's just cool to see the evolution. But the sport as a whole has just been growing, and then there's starting to be money and more exposure, so it's good for everybody.
And that's like back to competition, because like they're taking it at the highest level. It used to be okay. There's a very small group of guys that were great, start training together, and maybe there was a few teams, and then more and more people come. They're like, okay, well, I'm going to start working with you, so we're going to go over here. Like you mentioned DDS, and they broke off. Gordon Ryan still continued on with Danaher, and they've started developing new wave. Craig Jones is on his own.
They all kind of talk. There's all this backstory and politics they talk. But it's entertaining.
There's a lot. I like a good beef. It's a good beef. But it's drawing a lot of attention to the sport, whether it's wanted attention or not. But then there's the Atos guys, and there's the 10th Planet guys, and they all have their own like little systems. And I don't know. It's been really fun to watch the sport grow. Coming from when we first started, it was like one of so our instructor Trevor, he was one of the first, I mean, one of the first jujitsu gyms in like Western Canada
Yeah,
to
yeah.
like to start.
Basic jiu-jitsu,
Yeah.
old school.
And so there's just like there wasn't a lot of stuff around there, but yeah, to see it evolve has been
Yeah. Well, one thing I think the biggest thing that I want to say is that most people ask me, "Oh, where can I train? Where can I train?" And then people have this thought that it's like, "Oh, I'm going to go to a gym like MMA or jiu-jitsu." Like they fear that they're going to get hurt. I always say, try a gym, like try it out for free. Most gyms have a free trial, but just go try it out, see if you like it. It'll take a while, but it's just eliminate that fear. It's like no one's gonna like hurt you. People think even if it's jujitsu or like sparring or MMA or kickboxing, they have in this mind that they're gonna be sparring and it's gonna be super violent. That's the part that I always tell people. I'm like, hey, try it out, man. It's not, the sparring is like a very small fraction, and it's not what you think. It's not like you're gonna get hurt. It's just like just go there, learn, and you realize that punching and kicking or rolling is the best cardio, best exercise. I always say jujitsu is great because it makes you better at any other sport because it gets you to learn your body, discover your body. Because I like the first one, my first fight, Trevor was like, "Oh, we got to educate your legs." I'm like, "What the hell does that mean?" And I look, my legs are flat. Didn't know what it meant. I didn't even know what an underhook was. My legs are flat. And then the last few fights, I'm all doing leg locks and all this because I'm like, "Oh, dude, my legs are educated." I'm like, I didn't even know what that meant.
Yeah, yeah.
But the point is like,
Yeah,
man,
you don't know what you don't know what you don't know.
you don't know what you don't know. But if you know it, I mean, that's what earlier you were saying. Like one of my favorite things from Bruce is like, knowing is not enough. Like we must apply.
Yeah.
You can have all these ideas. You can learn. You can like learn and be certified in this and this belt. But if you're in a real life situation and all of a sudden everything shuts off, if you can't apply it, it's worthless. And that's the same thing as in business. I'm like, if you're learning all these skills but you don't apply them, it's like, it's just yeah, it's all kind of like interrelated, I find.
Yeah, it's super interesting. Like one of the things that I like about martial arts as well, like whether you're standing and sparring or whether you're on the ground, like yes, you're always learning. It's good. You get a good workout, physical exercise. The mental aspect of it though, like if you're talking to somebody that's ADD or distracted,
You are right
like
now.
myself. There's very little else that you're thinking about if you're trying to protect your neck in a moment where you're getting suffocated and you're trying to figure out how you're gonna get out of that. You're either gonna tap or you're gonna find like a tiny little half-inch of room where you can breathe or get out and protect the neck and always trying to think a couple steps ahead of how you're gonna get out of that situation. Or maybe you've gotten into a really good situation now you're like, all right, what do I do from here? Do I stay like back to the lay and pray thing, right? It's like, do I stay?
Progress
Do I
the position.
move?
What do I do? Am I
Inch
going to
by
lose
inch?
this?
Yeah, I'm feeling him like he's starting to hip out a little bit. He's going to escape. Do I go for that arm bar? Do I jump up there? Do I take the back?
There's so much going on. You don't have time to think about anything else.
There's nothing else that's going on. So it's super therapeutic. As much as it doesn't look like it, it's to me a form of meditation, because if you can break down what meditation is, like I've never been good to like sit and stare at a drop of water on a leaf and like just focus on that one thing. Like that's a very difficult thing to do. But if in like rolling meditation, you're only thinking about really that one thing, and that's progressing for protecting your neck. Like I'm not thinking about the what I had for lunch. I'm not thinking about the conversation that I had with my wife, or the argument that I was in with a friend or a business partner or whatever it was. It's like, no, I'm thinking about that one thing.
100%. I couldn't agree with you more. I couldn't agree with you more. Like that is like you described it perfectly. If you're in sparring or doing jujitsu, for me, like when people say, "Oh, like you step from the cage," and that's so crazy. To most people, that sounds crazy. When you train and you're prepared, it's not crazy at all. But being an ADHD and then going in there, I would always say how to explain it to people. Like I noticed I was more nervous cornering somebody when Ryan had a fight. I was like, "Oh my god, this is what my people feel." Because when you watch it, it's emotional. Like, oh, like it's like if you've never been to a live MMA show, you realize it's pretty intense if you know, especially if you know the people. But when I would go in there, I would be in control, and I would always say I've never been more focused in my life. Like I walk in there and I'm actually calm because I'm like focus, like and just be calm and then just be ready for everything. But just being prepared is important. But just being calm, because like Bruce said, like a tense muscle is a slow muscle. That's why his whole thing is about flow, like be like water, right? So you got to be chill, be ready to like adapt. So you can't do that if you're tense. So for me, I'd be so focused, and I would say like I've never been more focused in my life, because I'm like I don't want to get my ass kicked in front of my
You
friends
got
and family.
yeah, you got along the line there.
But it's 100% true, which is kind of hard to explain unless somebody is like trained. Like you just training makes a difference. Oh, I'm sparring, I'm doing jujitsu, but so much is going on, but you're still focused on the situation. So it's good to hone in your attention, and it is kind of relaxing in a weird sense. It'll sound weird to civilians, but I definitely found that would be the most focused I've ever been. It would be like pretty cool actually. My last fight, I was like actually cross-legged and zenning in the cage. I don't know if you saw that, but I was like, first time ever. There's a picture of my cross-legged, and I'm just like this. I'm just like, just chill. And I was just like the most chill that I've ever been, just because I was like mentally prepared and just focused. And I was like, oh man, it's kind of abnormal to people that have never been in that situation, but there is something really peaceful about it.
How do you how do you train for that peacefulness in the case, like if you were like you're saying you're picturing you in the cage sitting there cross-legged, very very zen, that's just something that comes natural. So is that just because you're putting confidence in your training? Is it because you're putting confidence in God that's like laid out in front of you, whatever's going to happen is going to happen? Is it what how do you train for zen?
I mean, even on a daily basis, I always share my goal is to be a Zen master, because there's so much stress in this world and it's hard to. But in terms of training and the whole Bruce Lee, and I've always been, attracted to that state, what he calls it, the state of flow, right? Like Bruce Lee, it's like, it's about being so calm. Like if you try to catch something, like you're going to be slower than if you just react. So that's something that I've noticed, which is why a lot of visualization goes into fighting. It's a big part of it, and the psychological aspect, where I didn't do it like hardcore, but I would always be like, okay, just go with the flow. It doesn't matter what the other person does. It's like I'm just ready to adapt to any situation. And in that case, I would always put on a song that makes me mellow and I want to loosen up and dance. So I had a song come out, walk. I would always like to walk out first, because it gives you that extra few minutes of chill. Because when you come out, like your heart's beating, you're racing, but it's like you want to be really calm. So if I came up first, I'm like, oh, that's kind of I prefer that, because it gives me a few extra minutes to chill.
Is that that's a kind of a almost like a little hack there, if you can come out first? Is that preferred by
I don't know. I haven't asked other people. I know for me, I don't know if some people may want to come out last, because then you don't have time to let the adrenaline drop and you're ready to go. So I haven't really asked people that. I just know for me, I know that my excuse me, I know that my heart rate is pumped up with the fans in the crowd, and then just getting that extra few minutes of calmness, and I just deep breathe and to bring my heart rate down, because I mean I want to keep as much cardio as I can. So in this case, I was just feeling myself. I was like, okay, man, this was a good chance. It's my last fight. I did all the work. I can't let this guy take this opportunity away from me, because you sell the tickets is one thing. You're there, it's fun, and it happens. I'm like, oh, you got to do the damn thing, right? And I'm like, okay, stay focused, be chill. And as something, I don't know, I just always want to do that, walk in the cage, and I had some time to chill, and I'm just like, it just came natural to me, because I always do like the Wing Chun, like sometimes on face-offs, I do the Wing Chun to not look at my opponent and just be in my own zone.
Yeah.
Which can weird them out, like what the hell is this guy doing, right? And it's just like, for me, it's just that's me being in my Zen zone, the breathing exercises. And I just had some time, and I just sat cross-legged, and I forgot when I saw a picture, I'm like, oh, that's cool. I always want to do that. I only did it once. But then if I remember hearing him coming out and screaming like, ah! And I was like, whoa, if I wasn't Zen, like that could have thrown me off. But since I was tapped into like the Zenness, I actually used his song against him, because he had a really cool song. I was like, oh, I'm like, this is a good song.
Yeah.
So I tapped into his song. So it wasn't messing with me. It was actually keeping me in that zone. But it's not something you just trust in your training that you're ready to go. Right? You can't go into a fight thinking you're going to lose. And in this case, it's like I put in all the work. I'm like, it's good. Like the cards will the cookie will crumble. Whatever goes. Like I'm ready to go. So you can't. It's about being fearless, right? It's about like anything that happens is meant to happen. So it's like you can't get too attached to the end result. It's like when I was on a bad losing streak, I'm like, oh, I gotta win, I gotta get back, I gotta win. You're putting all this pressure on yourself. You're putting all this pressure on yourself. And then I got to the point where I was like, you know what? If I lose this one, I'm retiring. I won it. And then I got another opportunity, and I was supposed to be for the belt. And I'm like, I didn't, but I won it. And I'm like, okay. I'm like, this is it. I'm like, either you do it or you don't. But it's like as soon as I stop fearing the loss is when I started having fun again. And then that's when I got on my little win streak and was able to have that last fight, which I think you were there. I think the the fans enjoyed that.
Yeah, oh, yeah.
That was kind of a roller coaster.
It was a fun night.
Pretty cool times. Crazy thing was 5 years ago.
Yeah, 5 years
That's
ago,
crazy.
and then COVID hit, and that was like
Everything shut down, gym shut down.
weird time.
It's been a weird time.
Yeah, I want to just talk a little bit a couple things that I picked up that you mentioned back about sort of back to the Zen thing. You had mentioned, you work to always try and be that Zen master, to find yourself in that flow state, to
I try to do that every day. It's easier said than done.
that takes a lot of time and effort, and if you know that you're going to be going and stepping into that ring, and you're going to need that Zen to really have to understand and manipulate your environment a little bit, or your manipulate your mental state and prepare that for whatever's going to come, and for the opportunity then, and just kind of put yourself in that space is always getting into that Zen space. Like, it very rarely just happens. So, and that on its own takes a lot of work and effort. I've found, even in my day, just, before I come to the office, right, I have a little kind of routine. I have to, Tony Robbins says it best. He's like, I wasn't born Tony Robbins. I built this motherfucker.
He worked his way up to it.
Right. And so, but it doesn't come without all these little steps along the way, and prepping and breathing and practicing and doing, all that boring stuff. But you have to set that environment to get into that mind space, or that head space, in order for you to really attack that day, or in your case, beat the hell out of your opponent before he beats you up.
Mm-hmm.
But to be able to focus and set that environment and put intention on those little, whether it's the morning routine, whether it's the things that you do in between calls, or before a sales call with a client, to really make sure that you're putting yourself in that zone. And that might be because you've come off of a bad call, or a frustrating call with a staff member, or a supplier or vendor or whatever, and you're kind of like fired up, but you have to like really change your environment and kind of calm down within that 5 or 6 minute period before you switch tasks and get into that. And so being able to channel those different frequencies,
Mm-hmm.
to have the highest impact on whatever task is laid out in front of you, or whatever it is that needs to be done, and be able to flow. Like Bruce said, like you mentioned, like water it's a discipline in itself.
Yeah, 100%. So, I mean, to answer that, that is a loaded question. But I would say, instead of the word you said, manipulate the situation, what I've noticed is that the more you try and control something, control is like, that's actually detrimental to being in that flow or that state.
Yeah.
So it's more about reacting. Because what I love about Jeet Kune Do, for those that don't know, it means having no way as a way, right? It's like, oh, okay, what does that even mean? It's like, when my opponent contracts, I expand. When he expands, I contract. So I am reacting to what they're doing. So my goal is to be so focused in the moment that I feel confident to react to anything that's going to happen. If I control me, like, oh, I'm going to do this, it's not going to work. It's not going to be like that. It's about reaction. So I'm feeling sharp. I'm on weight. I'm like light on my feet. I'm like training the weapons and all that stuff. Like, we're always like, we train with live blades, because then your reaction time is really quick. When I was at TriStar, I started doing some boxing, and that was like, oh, you're good in the pocket. I'm like, oh, okay, that's from like weapons training. You're good in the pocket. Your reaction time is very fast. So for me, it's about knowing that I can react to anything and keep myself safe. So that's kind of like my Zen, just having the confidence to react to any situation, which is why you need to be dialed right in to nothing else matter. I'm super, super, super focused. And you're like, okay, now I gotta react. Like, my head's on the line, my limbs are on the line. But then when you go to the ground, then it's like, okay, now you gotta, as opposed to my first fights, you're like, oh my God, you go for a neck, and I gas myself and go for a guillotine. I'm like, that's like rookie stuff. But eventually with the experience, you can stay calm in this uncomfortable situation. And then you're like, okay, if I do this, if I like do this, the ref might stand this up. I'm like, I'm safe. Realizing the places where you got to move are going to get your head smashed in, or when you're safe and you can take a breath. Like that is kind of the way that helped me approach those situations and finding that zen. It's really about being prepared and calm and knowing that, like I said earlier, detach myself from the outcome. I'm like, I have to win this, or it's always like it's gonna happen the way it is. Just like just be ready for anything, and then that kind of takes the pressure off. Of like, I need to do this because if I want to do this movement doesn't work, then I might get frustrated. It's like sometimes I had a crappy fight, and I'm trying to take it. I'm like, I'm gonna take him down, and then I'm having the worst fight because I'm trying to force things. So it's all about not forcing things, and that's the Zen thing. That's the same thing with life too. Right? If you have a bad call, it's like you have to one be super present in that moment to best handle a difficult situation. And if it's like once it happens, if something doesn't happen your way, you can't be emotional because that's when your judgment gets clouded and you're gonna start making mistakes. So it's kind of like I don't know. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes a ton of sense. My head's a little spinning a little bit, but yeah, I get it, man. The how much of the so I want to ask about some of the boring work because at the same time in these early stages, I don't know how much you were doing this later in your career, but at the early stage, like you mentioned, selling tickets, like you're also one, it's like you're training for a fight.
Yeah.
But in these early stages, you're also trying to hustle tickets because you need people to show up and like
Oh yeah. The worst part. Worst part of fighting locally is selling tickets.
the day of your fight,
Oh.
you're like people are sending you text messages like, oh hey, I got another place gonna come, can I grab another ticket? And you're like, yeah, but I'm literally fighting in 3 hours, but
Yeah.
I'll come meet you at the side.
I'd set a cutoff.
And like
I got better at it. And I set a cutoff. I'm like, this is the last day because like if you don't give the tickets back, like they charge you for it. So I'm like,
Yeah.
guys, I'm like, if you want tickets, let me know by this date. I'm giving them back. And then without fail, people are gonna be, oh, can I get another one? Can I go one? I'm like, dude, I'm done because I don't want to be thinking about that like 2-3 days out before a fight.
Yeah.
So when I first fought on the island because it was illegal here in Vancouver, like 5 of my friends came and it was super fun. And then my last one, it just kept getting more and more because we're local. And I think I had like 165 or something tickets to my last one. I got better at it, and I'm like, I'd have a cutoff date, and I'd have friends help me. Like, okay, I got my construction guys, I got my Richmond guys, I got my the construction crew. You take care of all the construction guys, and I have the dojo guys. I have them put on the dojo, and then everybody do it there. And then I have certain groups, and then like that would kind of. It was still a pain. It was still a pain in the ass. That was the worst part of fighting, but it's pretty cool when it all comes together and there's people sitting everywhere, and then it's like it's worth it. But I mean, yeah, that's the part that it's like, dude, I just want to train. I just want to show up and put on a show for the fans and have fun.
Yeah.
But tickets is definitely
but it's still like it's that kind of boring, frustrating stuff. But like it has to happen in order to make that fight almost worth it. Like you have to. There's a part of that where it's like, oh, I just gotta grit my teeth and I gotta do the shit that I really don't.
It's like work. It's like work, right? I can make as much with selling tickets than I did for my fight. It's like it's work. It sucks, but sometimes work sucks. But I mean, you're doing it for a reason, right?
Yeah.
There's a lot of pluses to it. Doing it is not fun, but I mean, it's not just for nothing. Like you make a little bit of money, and then people are there, and it's a pretty fun event. But it's like sometimes you got to do the grunt work. I mean, you got to get to the you go through the crappy stuff to get to the good stuff. Well, that's why some people say when you fight out of town, like that's the one thing you can be spoiled. You don't have to sell any tickets, and then you just show up. You don't have to worry about it. Oh, that's great. Yeah. So that's kind of like the double-edged sword. When you're local, you have to do it. It sucks, but then the plus side is you got the fan behind you, and it's like extra exciting when you I mean, you're there. I had the best friends doing this. I'm not gonna lie. It's so loud. I have such a good time, and it was just like it was pretty cool. But when I fought in Edmonton or Grand Prairie, it was just like no. Like my girl, like my wife, my wife, and like my team, and it's just like they bring you in to lose, but it's kind of fun to be that guy, to be the spoiler. Yeah, it's kind of cool. It's a lot less pressure, but I mean, I'd rather go through the hassle of selling a bunch of tickets and then having my friends there because it was pretty good times, man.
Yeah, sometimes it's just you got to put in the work because the pressure's worth it. That extra effort that that you don't necessarily want to do, that you don't want to put in day out, it's gonna
it's the result, right?
It's
You do
kind of a
you do what you
huge
don't want to do
impact.
to get positive results. Just like in business, it's like it's little things that you don't like to do that are gonna like pay off in the long run. It's like an accumulation of little things. You just got to do it. You know you should, and then that's what I like about martial arts. It develops your discipline, right? Your discipline is doing, like Mike Tyson says, is like doing the things that you hate to do, but you do it like you love them.
Yeah.
It's like,
Yeah.
that's the thing about, do I feel like training today? I'm like, no. Am I going to do it? Yeah, I just put it in the calendar, just do it now. I'm like, I got lazy these past few years. I'm like, how the hell? I can barely go once a month to work out. I used to work out 10 times a week. How do I do that? I wouldn't think about it. It's in the calendar. You just do it. It doesn't matter how you feel. I don't feel like it doesn't matter. It's in the calendar. You just do it.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I could learn from my own lessons because I used to do it myself. And I'm like, why am I so lazy? So it's like, I'm trying to get back on that health track a little bit. But yeah, my little break turned into like a few years. But trying to get back in there. We'll have some more
Yeah.
soon.
Yeah, you're in great
I lost
shape
a bit of
now.
weight.
Yeah,
I'm
you're
trying to
in
get
great shape. You're looking pretty shredded these days. So
Lean.
that's great.
Yeah.
Cool. All right, man. Well, hey, let's wrap this up.
Awesome,
It's
dude.
been awesome, man. Love to come back. I think that there's a ton that we can learn in business from martial arts. I know certainly I attribute a lot to who I am today
Yeah.
because of the training, the hours that I put in on the mat, and the gloves that I put on, and the bags that I hit, and the people that I sparred with, digging deep into those times when I really didn't want to, and certainly having to be humble about it, and being humbled many times has really shaped me into who I am today. So plays a huge part in yeah. Any last words? Appreciate you being here.
No, I agree, man. It's one of the best times of my life was training, meet the people you meet. That's the biggest part, is the people you meet, the relationships you build, and the skills that you learn from just putting in that work. So I couldn't relate more to what you're saying, and I look back on those years fondly, and I will be making my return because I miss a lot of the guys. So I'll be making an effort to get out there on the mats and train a bit more in the new year. And I appreciate you having me here, man. It's been a pleasure, man.
Heard that. All right, Dave Showtime Perron. Thank you very much.
You got
Well done.
it. Cheers.
Cheers.